Going to bring in another guest to join us. It's the host of the mother of all talk shows and former MP, George Galloway. George, always a pleasure to have you on Uncensored, particularly when you spent all afternoon spray gunning me on social media about how you're going to rip me to pieces. And as you often do, by the way, and as you often do, by the way, woefully mischaracterising me as some kind of Starmer fanboy when I spent almost all of his tenure as Prime Minister hammering the guy. The only thing I've really agreed... the only thing I've agreed with is about Ukraine.
And Boris Johnson. You're a fanboy for him and Boris Johnson.
Don't misquote me. Don't misquote me.
I am specific of war in the Ukraine.
You're specifically on Ukraine, I agree with both Johnson and Starmer. That is true.
And how?
But that does not make me a fanboy for either of them. I have many things, I've hammered them over too. But on that point, you're wrong and they're right about Ukraine.
Well, you say that, but I'm on the same line as your friend Donald Trump and the American administration. And it's really come to something when, having spent a lifetime myself fighting against NATO and American wars, it's the Americans that are trying to stop the war, and Piers, Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer who are trying to keep it going.
I don't want to keep it going.
A lot of Ukrainian,
I don't want to keep it going.
You've got a lot of Ukrainian blood on your hands. You have lied about this war from the beginning.
Actually, Vladimir Putin has the blood on his hands of Ukrainians.
You can have a monologue if you like.
It was Vladimir Putin.
You can have a monologue if you like.
3 years ago,
bring on a guest.
3 years ago,
let the guest speak.
3 years ago. If you're going to libel me, I will hold you to account.
You have lied about the origin of this war, about the duration of this war, about the course of this war, and now having caused you and your war party the death of 1 million Ukrainians while claiming to love Ukrainians, you're now calling for British lives to be lost.
What a load of absolute bullshit.
That constitutes close to a war crime.
What
and
you are talking.
Of it.
Listen. Get off your Putin fanboy hat for a moment.
Well, you see, there you go.
I'm going to respond in kind.
Reagan said.
I'm going to respond.
Anybody who disagrees with you is a Putin fanboy.
Can I respond, please?
Why don't you listen to Donald Trump?
Can I respond?
He told you yesterday.
Can I respond?
Can
I respond or not?
Donald Trump told you yesterday that joining Ukraine, forget about it. That's the cause of the war in the first place, which I've been telling you from the beginning.
Yeah, okay, let me respond if I may. Can I respond?
It's your show, Piers.
Okay, Donald Trump, who I know well, I've been a friend of his for 20 years, good and bad. We've had some up times and bad. Spoke to him a few weeks ago. We had a great conversation. But he's absolutely wrong when he categorises this as something that Ukraine started. Absolutely wrong to call Zelensky a dictator. The real dictator is Vladimir Putin. 3 years ago, he illegally invaded a sovereign democratic European country and started murdering with impunity Ukrainians. The Ukrainian people, to everyone's astonishment, managed to repel that early invasion by Russian forces and are still repelling them 3 years later. They've reached an impasse where there's been little movement on the battlefield now for many months, but hundreds of thousands on both sides are dying. It's back to World War I scale of losses, and it has to end. I want the war to end like Trump does. I don't like his categorization of Zelensky as a dictator. I don't like the way he's trying to make out that they started this war when it was Russia, but I do agree with him that we need to have peace, and I actually think he's inherited the situation, and I think his way to try and forge peace by doing a minerals deal with Ukraine, which should satisfy his critics back in, particularly the MAGA critics who don't like the way they've wasted, as they see it, all these billions on Ukraine. This way they can recoup that through the minerals. I think it's a smart business deal by Trump if that happens. I think there's a general acceptance. You have to have the war now frozen on current geographic lines so that Russia would keep the territory it's taken but not have sovereignty over that, and Ukraine can try and politically get back the territory later because it was retained sovereignty. We'll see if that ever happens. But don't, please, with a straight face, try and tell me that Russia did not start this war 3 years ago. I know the history. I know what happened. And I know all the background to this. But the idea this is somehow bloody Zelensky's fault and Ukraine's fault is an absolute joke.
Blimey, that was a long response, Piers. I hope I'll get as long to respond to your response without you interrupting me. You're going to regret it when very soon Zelensky is sitting in a beachfront villa somewhere counting his ill-gotten gains and all the secrets of the rampant corruption between the Democrats and the Zelensky regime begin to tumble out of the cupboard. This war did not begin 3 years ago. You very well know that it began in 2014. You very well know that it began with a coup against the elected president of Ukraine, backed by Victoria Nuland and the administration at that time, and supported by you. You very well know that the criminalization of the Russian language, which followed hard on the heels of that coup, was the proximate reason for an uprising in the east of the country amongst Russian-speaking, ethnically Russian people. You very well know that Zelensky and his predecessor rained down shot and shell on the people of East Ukraine for 8 years before Putin intervened in 2022, and that 14,000 people, most of them women and children, were killed in that onslaught. You very well know that Zelensky was preparing for a final onslaught, a final solution. And while I'm on that subject, you're always telling us how much you love the Jews. You're supporting a regime which puts up statues to Nazi collaborators, to generals of the Galician division of the SS. You are
Zelensky is Jewish, you know that, right? You know Zelensky's Jewish, right? Do you?
But that's like saying there's no racism in America because Obama.
So a Jewish.
Obama,
so you're calling the Jewish leader of Ukraine a Nazi? Is that your position?
No, I'm not. But the regime is. You know very well that all over Ukraine, the statues and the heroization of Bandera and the SS in Galicia and the mass murderers of Jews, including at Babi Yar.
There are I'm going to respond to that. There are proportionally, as you know, to quote you, I'll start this by saying, as you know, there is a tiny percentage of people in Ukraine who are neo-Nazis, as there are, by the way, in many of the neighbouring countries there, including in Russia, right? And they are not
putting up these statues.
They are not
Who's
a significant.
Heroizing
they are
these
not
people.
They are not.
They're calling libraries after
Let me finish.
They're
let me finish.
Calling university wings after
Let
them.
me finish. They are
There's
not.
a Bandera
Let me finish.
In Kiev.
Let me finish. There are not a significant number of people, and for you to call the Jewish leader of Ukraine somebody who is leading a regime propping up Nazis is despicable. Despicable.
I've already said to you, that's like saying there's no racism in America because Obama was briefly the president of the country. The entire western part of Ukraine played a decisive role in the mass murder of Jews and Poles and others in the Second World War. And now they are heroizing the heroes of the SS and the other collaborating forces.
A tiny number of people do that, as you well know. Tiny number of people.
When all these things become clear.
Let me ask you, why do you support? Why do you support? Okay. Let me ask you why. Why do you support? Why do you support?
Counting his money.
Let me finish.
You're going to be sorry for all the heroization of him that you have done.
You know what, George? You might be also sorry for propping up a despicable Russian dictator who illegally invaded a sovereign democratic European country. You might look at yourself in the mirror in a few years when he carries on Putin invading other countries, which he will, because this was never about Russian speakers in Ukraine. This was all about trying to restore the Soviet Union. He's a despicable tyrant who will prove people like you to be useful idiots in this war.
Why doesn't Donald Trump agree with you?
Because he's wrong.
Well, you know, you have been up his ass all of these 2 decades.
Really?
You've kissed his feet.
Really?
You've licked his boots. You've fawned upon him.
Really?
You have been his super fan. And now, on this fundamental question of our age, He's entirely wrong.
Well, no, he's wrong to call Zelensky a dictator, make out he's the perpetrator of the war. Yes, he's right to forge peace.
Said that NATO,
he's right to forge peace. And by the way, I hammered Trump so much over things like the COVID pandemic, January 6th, stolen election. He didn't talk to me for 6 months. So this idea I'm always sucking up to him is complete lies
everybody
again.
Watching
complete
knows,
lies.
Piers, everybody watching knows you are Trump's biggest ass.
I like
kisser.
him.
Everybody watching.
I like
knows
Donald
that.
Trump.
I know you like him.
I like him.
Like him.
And on
you
many
like
things,
him.
on many
but
things,
on this,
I like him. And on many things,
fundamental question.
Let me finish.
The biggest question in politics in the world today, he's got it completely wrong.
No, you didn't hear me. Why didn't you listen to what I said?
What do you mean I didn't hear you?
I've literally said to you, on his plan to get peace, I agree with him. I don't agree with him about calling Zelensky a dictator, and I don't agree that it was Ukraine that started the war. You do, because you're Putin's little expendable.
Ukraine was the most corrupt country in
more corrupt
Europe
than Russia?
More corrupt than Russia? It was designated by the economists,
what about Putin?
by the FT,
what about Putin?
by everyone who knows about these things.
Tell me about Putin.
Listen, Joe
What's Vladimir
corruption,
Putin, George?
The Biden family's
George,
corruption
what is Vladimir Putin?
Will turn out to be.
What is Vladimir Putin?
Stop parroting these things.
What is Vladimir
You're going to
Putin?
regret it. It is Zelensky.
Tell me about
and his
Putin.
predecessor
You can't do it, can
Joe
you?
Biden
You cannot
and
do
Barack
it.
Obama.
You will not
and
criticize
John
Vladimir
Kerry's
Putin.
son or daughter, whoever they are nowadays.
You won't criticize
and
Vladimir
all
Putin,
the
will you?
American oligarchs.
You won't criticize Vladimir Putin. Look at you. How pathetic.
In the corruption in Ukraine.
But no
and
corruption in
you're going to find
Russia.
out all about it soon.
No
Because
corruption in Russia.
I'll tell you what, your mate, Donald Trump, is going to open every book, every drawer, every filing cabinet, and you're going to be embarrassed.
Okay, final question, George. Can you think of anything negative to say about Vladimir Putin or not?
Well, I wouldn't have voted for him, as I told you.
You wouldn't have voted for him. Okay.
I would have voted.
All right.
I would have voted for the leader of the opposition.
I got it. So you can't think of anything negative to say about the single most ruthless dictator in the world. And that says it all, George. Anyway, always a pleasure having you on Uncensored. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let me just quickly go to my panel.